Welcome. I'm JondaKnows, CEO and Director of Financial Planning at JondaKnows. In today's video, we are going to talk about the power behind a Dynasty trust. As we go through the material, I'd like for you to keep one thing in mind. You need to define your vision before you execute your plan. Proverbs 13:22 says, "A good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children, and the wealth of the sinner is laid up for the just." So I just have a question for you. How are you going to approach this goal? You might be saying, Jonda, every time I turn around and, make a little money or get ahead, it just seems like I owe more and more taxes, or, the IRS has their hand in my pocket every time I turn around. Trust me, I understand completely. One of the things that we face when we're planning an inheritance potentially is gift tax. And currently in 2026, the personal exclusion is $19,000. So an individual can give $19,000 away to any person that they wish, and they are not limited on how many people they can give that amount to. If you are married, that doubles to $38,000. And once again, you can give that away to as many people as you like. And for clarification, you do not have to be related to them. Also, you might be thinking, well, Jonda, there's probably inheritance tax. Well, currently, the federal lifetime exemption is $15 million. Now, before you're tempted to click off this video and think, wow, this is not for me, don't do it. There's some great information in here, and I want to remind you that this is the current lifetime federal exemption, and that is a law. Laws can and do change, so future administrations could certainly change this lifetime federal exemption. So we need to make sure that we have our ducks in a row, so to speak. I also want you to know that every state has a potential inheritance tax. I'll give you a quick example. Pennsylvania. If you leave money to anyone in the state of Pennsylvania, depending upon how they are related to you, will determine how much tax the state of Pennsylvania will charge you. And it can be as much as 15%. So again, depending upon where you're residing, there could be a state inheritance tax that might affect what you want to leave to your children or your children's children. Finally, we want to talk about a generation skipping transfer tax, and you may know this as the GST tax. Basically, this can be up to 40% of the value of your estate when you pass for every generation that passes away. So every time a generation is passing away, potentially 40% of that value could be going to the generation skipping transfer tax. So guys, knowledge is power. And I've said for years, if you know the rules, you can win the game. So we've got kingdom goals. And so let's talk about some of those. The primary goal, obviously for this video, is to maximize the estate that you can leave to your children and your children's children. An objective or a key objective in doing that, there are two. One, we need to minimize these taxes that we've just discussed. Actually, we'd like to avoid them altogether where possible. And then we also want to make sure that we are protecting these assets from creditors. All right, so every purpose is established by counsel, and with good advice, make war. That's what Proverbs 20:18 tells us. So I'd like to give you some good advice. And that is, own nothing and control everything. Own nothing, control everything. You might be saying, well, Jonda, how in the world do you do that? Let me introduce you to the Dynasty Trust. The Dynasty Trust is an irrevocable trust. You, as the grantor, will transfer assets into the irrevocable Dynasty Trust. These assets will then be controlled by trustees that you can select, that you can also control if your initial trustees choose not to serve or should happen to pass away. Inside this Dynasty Trust, you can allow it as the grantor. You are going to write the rules of your Dynasty Trust, and the law will allow this trust to open businesses and own businesses. In our flow chart on the screen here, you'll notice I've given you examples of 4 LLCs And then you'll notice to the right of the screen an investment portfolio. So you might own real estate. You might have an investment portfolio. You may have a business that's generating income to the trust, and that's perfectly fine. Something else I'd like to point out is the trustees through the trust can hire the grantor, that would be you. They can hire or appoint you to manage the trust assets. So I want you to think about that for a second, because I know many of you get a little concerned when we talk about irrevocable trust and transferring assets into an irrevocable trust. You lose control. That's your biggest concern, number one concern. But in this strategy that we're looking at here, you can do that, but by strategically picking your trustees and working together with them, they can hire or appoint you to control or manage these businesses as they're part of the trust. That's pretty cool. Now, what happens to the income from these businesses or from the real estate or from the investment portfolio? That income is paid to the trust, and then again, based upon how you've determined that income will pass to your heirs, it could potentially pay out to your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and future generations. You can provide for health, education, maintenance, and support. So I have said before that if you can envision it, the trust can carry it out. I want to point out before we leave this slide that the investment portfolio here, you might initially think, okay, that's probably stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and things like that. Although it can be, the investment portfolio can hold securities like that. The most lucrative asset to the trust is going to be permanent life insurance. Now, we do not have time in this video to go into the various types of permanent life insurance, but I can tell you that whole life is not the answer for this trust. I understand fully that John D. Rockefeller used whole life in his trust. He had a Dynasty trust, but I'd like to remind you that's all he had to work with. Today, we have much better opportunities. And so again, we can discuss those in a separate video. Just know whole life is not the answer here. All right, so we have some key challenges. Our main challenge for you is going to be to identify your attorney. All right, right behind that, you need to identify trustees. Again, all of these people are going to be very critical. So make sure that you are selecting them wisely. All right. And also, I'd just like to let you know that a good estate planning attorney does not just draft documents. They build a fortress around a family's future. All right. So there is a website here. If you don't have an estate planning attorney or you don't know where to turn, you can certainly go to the American Academy of Estate Planning Attorneys, and that's the website I have on the screen for you there. You can sort by state and select an attorney that you would like to interview and potentially work with. All right, some key next steps. Again, whatever you envision, the trust can enforce. So clarify your priorities. What exactly do you want to happen? It's your money, and you can determine what happens to it after you're gone if you plan. Behind that, make some final edits to your documents, and then shortly after that, execute your plan. This is how you leave a lasting legacy for generations to come. Key takeaways here. Tax avoidance avoids the 40% generation skipping transfer tax and estate taxes every time a generation passes away. This would apply to both federal and state by using a Dynasty trust. Asset protection. This acts as a spendthrift vehicle. It can shield the inheritance from bankruptcy, divorces, lawsuits, and creditors. And finally, stewardship. It allows the grantor to own nothing while controlling everything. As we close this video out, I would just like to remind you that those who fail to plan to fail. If you would like to know more about a Dynasty trust, please go to JondaKnows.com, click the yellow bar at the top of the screen to schedule a private consultation with me. Thank you so much.